Ladies and gentlemen, good evening and welcome to the Royal Society of Medicine and In Conversation Live. I'm Susie Walton, I'm the Vice President of the RSM. We started these events in 2019 in Wimpole Street, London HQ, and we've interviewed key thinkers, leaders in different fields and many others. Despite COVID-19 putting the country into lockdown, we are doing all we can to stay connected with our membership and the wider public. So tonight's event comes to you live and via technology. Tonight's guest is a Sunday Times columnist, the former chair of Channel 4 Television, the current chair of the Institute of Cancer Research, which is one of the world's largest cancer laboratories. He's also headed up the Royal Society of Arts. He runs Risk Capital Partners, a private equity house. He used to run the Pizza Express chain. He started the Strada restaurant chain and was chair of the Giraffe restaurants. He's injected capital into dental surgeries, a cruise company, a pub chain, an activity holiday company, a hotel company, bingo clubs. He has 4 honorary degrees, and relevant to our audience tonight, he studied medical sciences at university. I believe he also owns a pier and a 10-pin bowling business. That man is Luke Johnson. Good evening, Luke, and welcome to the Royal Society of Medicine.
Hi, Susie.
Hi, Luke. I have to start off by saying, do you really own a pier?
Well, I chair a business called the Brighton Pier Group, and that owns Brighton Palace Pier, which has been going since 1899, and I reckon is probably the most visited pier in the world, except perhaps for Santa Monica Pier.
So piers, as I said in the introduction, is just one of the vast array of things that you have owned, injected money into, run, set up, etc., etc. You genuinely never seem to stand still, Luke. So I think certainly what I want to know, and I'm sure what a lot of our audience want to know, is what motivates you and what stands out for you as your proudest achievement in all these things you've done.
I think what motivates me has changed. I think that I like to make things happen. I like to generate activity. I like to create jobs and see things succeed. I like to be busy. I like to innovate and try new things. And, I enjoy the cut and thrust of business and the drama of it all, the uncertainties as well as the successes. And I spend probably 20 to 25% of my time on non-profit activities, like, for example, the Institute of Cancer Research and the Almeida Theatre, because I think they provide an interesting balance to life. And I feel that things like the arts and medical research are important, and it puts things into perspective. So it's by no means all my work is business, although that's what I've done for 35 odd years.
Now, you've been at the helm of companies and ventures, Luke, in really so many different industries. So what do you see as the most important qualities of a good leader or for good leadership?
They have to be good at motivating people. They have to have high energy levels. They have to be ambitious. I think they need to be pretty open and honest with their people. I think, they have to have a vision. I think optimism helps. Self-confidence, clearly. It's good, I think, if you're articulate, then you can express yourself. I think certainly in businesses or any organizations where there's finance involved, if you're numerate, that's very useful. I think you've got to be good at talent spotting. I think, empathy, so that you can understand what drives people and you can, therefore relate to them. I think a degree of ruthlessness is often necessary, because I don't think you can be too sentimental when you have to take difficult decisions. I think you have to be able to juggle the short and the long term in terms of strategy and where you want the organization or business to go to. There are many other attributes and talents that you require, but I think that's enough to be going on with.
That's quite a collection, quite a basket of competencies there that you've named. Is it true that you haven't always been in business, that at a certain point in your career you wanted to be a doctor and you trained in medical science, I believe?
Well, sort of. I had a grandfather I greatly admired who actually he practiced at St Mary's. He was a gastroenterologist. And so I followed him into medicine, and I did an undergraduate degree in physiology at Oxford. But I didn't qualify and do the clinical part of it because I discovered business at university, and I realized that I was probably more suited to the world of business. And I suppose I found the potential of the hierarchy and having to do exams through one's 20s, even into one's 30s, if you want to scale the heights in medicine, a little off-putting. I think doctors generally can have a wonderful career because they can do so many different things. They can obviously treat patients, but they can also do research, they can teach, they can write, they can do NHS work, they can do private practice, they can work in the armed forces and all sorts of other ways in which they can use their qualifications and skills. So actually, I think it's quite an attractive career, alongside the fact that they save lives. So that's good too.
So you say you discovered business at university. Do you mean you discovered the theoretical side of business and you wanted to study it from the academic perspective, or that you were doing something entrepreneurial at university?
Yeah, it was very much the latter, completely non-theoretical. We were hosting these parties in my rooms, and the college said they'd kick me out if we didn't stop. So we went to the local nightclub and persuaded them to let us have the venue on a Monday night for nothing. They took the bar money and we took the door money.
How did you go from there to your first significant business venture when you left university?
I pursued a double life. So I got jobs working for other people, initially in advertising, and then later on I went into the city and worked as a stockbroking analyst. But at the same time, I was with my business partner from university running various ventures. We had initially nightclub enterprises, and then we had a software business. And the turning point for me in terms of my business career was the takeover of Pizza Express, which happened when I was almost 30. And he and I formed a consortium to buy the business. And we then took it public. And that was very transformational for me in terms of, the scale of enterprise I was involved with, the fact that it was a wonderful brand which had not been fully exploited in terms of being rolled out all across the country. And it was successful as a PLC, and the team we had there with us as our partners running it was very driven, and our timing was very fortuitous. It was 1993, and the economy was turning up, and people were going out to eat more. And what Pizza Express offered at the time perfectly fitted with a lot of people's aspirations all around the country. So it was a virtuous circle of us opening more branches, them being popular, generating profits, enabling us to open still more. And I was very lucky in that we were able to buy control of such a tremendous business formula at a relatively young age.
This is one of your books. It's a brilliant read, Start It Up. So in Start It Up, you've got loads of your personal observations and experiences of building a business. Now, you've already told us that huge raft of competencies that make an ideal leader, but in Start It Up, you seem to be saying that if you think it through, people can do it. Do you believe that anybody can start a business if they're sufficiently motivated?
I think probably. I mean, for many, I'd say the vast majority of those who work for themselves, they're not going to employ others. They're not going to build a big business. They're not going to scale it up, as they say. And that's fine too. And my dad was a self-employed writer and always, since I can remember, worked for himself. Didn't employ anyone, but the satisfaction and the freedom and the ability to control your own destiny is what was important to him rather than taking orders. And I think there is, you know, in most of us, the desire to not simply work for the man and be part of a large organization. I think one of the great problems of big companies is bureaucracy and office politics. And I've had enough dealings with larger organizations to see that in action. And what can happen too often, I'm sad to say, is that mediocre people rise to the top because they are better at the games, but actually they're not necessarily the most effective individuals. So they do the politics awfully well, but they're not necessarily the inspiring ones who have the best ideas, if you see what I mean. And I think that's one of the shames of modern society, generally speaking. Businesses and government and so forth are bigger than ever. And, you know, we don't always get the best people at the top, sadly, because, you know, for the reasons I've said, they don't necessarily have the most wonderful talents. It's more that they are good at playing the system.
So what I'm wondering is, so that you've told us what you think about good leadership and that most people can start a business if they are sufficiently motivated. What I'm wondering is whether there's anything incompatible with good leadership. So I used to be in the Ministry of Defence, and I speak very carefully because of the Official Secrets Act. We used to send people to do, let's call them special duties. I was an operational military psychologist. And we used to have a profile, not necessarily of the characteristics we wanted to see in people that were doing special duties, but the characteristics we didn't want to see. And we would do psychometrics, we would do various other things, which I won't mention, but we had a definite profile of what we didn't want to see for that particular job. So when you're considering backing somebody or setting up a new venture, is there sort of in your head a checklist of things that you don't want to see because that makes for a bad leader?
Yes, and I think that if you have serious doubts, then, you know, when you back someone with money, you're going into partnership with them, and it's a very long-term relationship, and it's not like taking on an employee where, you know, you can let them go if they're in their probationary period, so to speak. If you partner with a founder and it doesn't work out, it's going to get messy and expensive. And obviously that has happened to me on various occasions. And, you know, I'd love to say that my judgment about people was impeccable, but it isn't. I have definitely made serious errors at certain points in my career, misjudging people, thinking they were more competent than they were, thinking they were honest when they weren't, etc. And it's, you know, very heartbreaking when you get these things wrong, particularly if people are disloyal or whatever. You know, you have to get over it, obviously, but I'd like to think there was a magic formula. I don't think there is. I've learned certainly that if your intuition, your gut instinct tells you there's something amiss early on, then listen to it. And although, you know, you can do psychometric testing and you can be relatively scientific about it, and obviously you can examine people's track records and qualifications and all the other things, references, so forth, that we do when we recruit people, I think we should not underestimate intuition, because I think quite often one's ability to sense that something is wrong, subconsciously almost, is more powerful than we give it credit for.
Do you think, knowing what we know now, that actually different decisions should have been made right at the very beginning? Obviously, that's post hoc rationalization, but if we had more information, do you think there were other ways of handling it at the start of the pandemic?
Yeah, I think that probably the key committees feeding in views and advice should have been more than just, so to speak, the scientists and the science, because I don't think you can say lives at any cost. The NHS doesn't do that. NICE doesn't decide which drugs to recommend based, excluding the cost. Of course, it takes cost into account. You know, the NHS has a fixed budget of 140 billion a year it is. So it can't just do whatever treatments and procedures that people want. And there is always going to be rationing. And I think that we should have had economists and even philosophers and business people feeding in to the government in a formal way in terms of advice, rather than exclusively scientists and clinicians who, you know, essentially had to take no account of the vast disruption, unprecedented disruption that lockdowns caused, and indeed the colossal infringement of our liberties, which I think is a unprecedented and frightening move, which, you know, even in wartime, there was less totalitarian stuff going on that we now have. And I just feel somehow that it's, you know, it's overreach by government. And even lockdown itself, I think, you know, there's very little research to say that it's, proven to succeed. There's some research been done since, but a lot of the papers have been produced on COVID since it started are very low quality. So I don't think we can necessarily take them as proving that it's necessary, that there is serious evidence that it's truly effective. And the cost of it is colossal and should not be underestimated.
So people see you as an entrepreneur, but as you're talking to us, your experience in the health sector is obviously coming out, and indeed you are the chair of the Institute of Cancer Research. Can you tell us how you got into that role and what you found rewarding in that?
A headhunter phoned me up and picked me. I'm not sure they had a long queue of people after the job, actually. I mean, obviously it's pro bono. It's a wonderful organisation, world leading. It's been going over a century. It is, based on 2 campuses, and it's essentially the sister organisation of the Royal Marsden Hospital, as all your audience will know, is the leading cancer hospital in the UK. And between us, we are one of the world's great cancer centres for treatment and research. We have a particular strength in drug discovery. And I think it's been fascinating to learn more about that over the last 7 or 8 years, to work with the brilliant scientists and clinicians who work with us in the Royal Marsden, and to try and help the cause in whatever way one can by, making the right appointments and setting strategy and helping to raise money and so forth. And the thing that you realise when you're involved in that particular field of medicine is that developing drugs takes an incredibly long time, too long. And I think one of the few possible silver linings of this awful period, the pandemic, with this incredible race to find a vaccine, which we may never find, but we all pray and hope we do, is that it may lead to the acceleration of drugs, because typically, I think, bringing new drugs from first discovery through all the trials, phase 1, 2, and 3, etc., to be widely available to patients to deliver public good can be 15 years or more, and it's too long for people to wait. And obviously, drugs must be safe, but again, you have to balance patient safety with patient good. And I think that perhaps post this terrible period, the regulators all around the world will find ways to accelerate the introduction of the right drugs, you know, with the necessary safety protocols, because I think society needs to develop things like vaccines and drugs more quickly. It will A, save money, and B, you know, it will obviously deliver health-saving treatments to sick people quicker.
So you sit as the current chair of the Institute of Cancer Research, and I know you've had that role for a number of years, but you then have all your business ventures. You've had a huge disparity in what you've done in the sense that you've been involved in so many sectors. What ambitions do you still have? Is there still another sector you would like to be involved in, or another role you'd like to do, or some hobby you want to pursue that you've not been able to yet? What does the future hold for you?
I don't know. I think firstly, we as a nation have to get out of this hole and right ourselves, if you like, so that we can get back to work and fix the problems. So I think that's the most immediate and pressing concern for all of us, frankly. I think longer term, I would like to be involved in lots of other areas that I wouldn't necessarily pick one. I'm agnostic. I think, you know, if it's interesting, the people are able and trustworthy, and if the opportunity looks exciting, then you know, I'm willing to look at it. I think I step down from the Institute of Cancer Research next year, and I think possibly post that, you know, I'd perhaps like to continue in that field of cancer treatment in some way, possibly through a business, possibly through a charity or what have you. I'm not sure, because I've enjoyed it and I think it's, you know, incredibly important field. So I think I'd like to do that. And, you know, I'd like to keep working. My father worked until his mid-80s, and I would like to do the same. I don't really believe personally in the conventional idea of retirement, especially in this era. I think that for those who are, you know, hungry and ambitious and have, you know, the idea that they need a reason to get up in the morning, a purpose, then they should keep working in one form or another, even if it's, you know, for a non-profit, because it gives you a role and a usefulness that I think, you know, most of us need one way or another.
What about hobbies and interests? Do you have any? Do you have time for anything non-work related?
Well, I have 3 children and a wonderful wife who works for the NHS. I write a weekly column in the newspaper. I have in the past written a few books, play a bit of tennis. I guess that's about it, really.
What are you reading at the moment?
What am I reading? I'm reading a thriller by The Big Sleep by Raymond Chandler. Very good it is.
You spoke there very briefly about being a dad. So you've been involved in homeschooling of late?
I have, yes. Yes, because my wife was, you know, going every day to the hospital. So I was doing the homeschooling for a certain period. And the 2 slightly older ones who are 13 and 15, they were all right. But the 10-year-old, that was hard work.
So
I'm quite impressed by teachers, actually, because keeping control of a whole class of 10-year-olds, yeah, that'd be beyond me for sure.
Yes, I've actually got 7 children. One of them's too young to go to school. One of them's a baby. 2 of them are grown up and have got jobs. So there's been 4 in the house who have been homeschooled, and it certainly does make you go back to basics, and it takes multitasking to a whole different level, doesn't it? When you have to weigh equally your business responsibilities and your parental responsibilities.
If you're working and doing the homeschooling, yeah, something often gives. It's not perfect, no.
So what do you do then in moments of high stress? So let's take the children out of it now, nothing to do with parenting, but in moments of real high stress, what do you do? How do you help yourself?
I'm sad to say that one of my great weaknesses is I have a temper, so I will lose it. What I have learned over the years is that if I can feel I'm losing my rag, then I will occasionally step out of the room and, wander off and go and have a coffee for 10 minutes or something and calm down a bit. And sometimes that will help, reduce the temperature. Also, another way actually of diffusing things if, things are very stressful and anxious is to make jokes and make light of it and laugh. And if you can tease the other person or vice versa, and that then, is a good solution. And then you get back to, you get things in proportion more, because unfortunately, I'm very capable of getting things out of proportion when I'm out of sorts, and that leads to mistakes and upset, and it's generally speaking a bad thing.
If you were being a psychoanalyst of yourself, Luke, what would you say you're not? Is there anything you would like to be a bit more of?
I'm not the world's best people manager, and I think if I had my time again, I would invest more time in engaging with people and motivating them better and cultivating them.
Thank you for that. And we could go on, and in fact, to all those people, all those unanswered questions, I've literally got dozens of pieces of paper here. I would say read Luke's Sunday Times columns. They're brilliant. I really look forward to them every Sunday. And Luke, before we close tonight, I would like to know, do you have a favourite saying or a proverb that you would like to leave the audience with?
Well, for my wife, I wanted to motivate her about things, so I commissioned a neon sign that says "Seize the Day." And I know it's a hackneyed phrase, but I think it's hard to beat. And I think all of us need reminding of it frequently. I don't just mean about business opportunities, but I mean about living in the present. One of the great things about children, which you will, I'm sure, agree with, is they're not worrying about the past or planning the future. They're living in the moment. And to a degree, that's also what Seize the Day is about, isn't it? It's about living for the day. And, this is life. We need to remember that frequently, because it's not a rehearsal.
Luke, that's brilliant. Thank you. Thank you very much for joining us tonight. You've been a really interesting and inspiring and a provocative guest. So thank you very much. Now, ladies and gentlemen, you have not been charged for tonight's webinar. Indeed, and if you wish, we're inviting you to support the RSM in these unprecedented times so that we may support others. If you'd like to make a donation, please go to support us on our website or follow the link on your screen. And any donations you give us will directly fund the RSM's vision, which is to advance health through education and innovation. So I'd like to thank you all for your generosity and for your time, and to Luke, and thank you very much to everybody for being a part of RSM's In Conversation series. Good night.